made it, sir, with the help of P-40. You like our P-40?
I think it would be reasonable to hope that the end of 1942 will see us quite definitely in a better position than we are now. And that the year 1943 will enable us to assume the initiative upon an ample scale.
You guys who are writing letters, hurry up. Looks like this will be our last stop.
Hey, look, Sarge. My girl lives in Jersey City, see? And I was wondering if maybe we might be headed for... What I mean is it still a military secret, or do you know where we're going?
I sure do, Joyce.
Yeah?
We're gonna win a war.
We were in the Pacific, battling Japan over islands with exotic names like Tulagi, Guadalcanal, Tarawa. In North Africa, we would aid our British allies by taking Algiers, Oran, Casablanca. But Europe, most of it occupied by the Axis powers, would remain beyond our reach for some time. The attack on Pearl Harbor had instilled in us a sense of fear, and we went to great lengths to protect ourselves. Windows were taped to reduce the danger from shattering glass. Even children were trained for emergencies. Blackouts required special treatment of windows. On the light side, even fashions were designed to cope with dim outs. This blackout drill in Manhattan was repeated all over the nation. Patrols were organized across the country, and civil defense units prepared for the possibility of an enemy attack. Birthday. In what had become a tradition, the March of Dimes held a charity party. Opera stars and polio-stricken children sang happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
And in the White House, a huge gala marked the president's Diamond Jubilee. Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, surrounded by motion picture actresses, cut the cake. Actress Carol Lombard was a crusader for war bonds. She and her husband Clark Gable captivated us as America's most romantic couple. When she died in a plane crash coming home from a bond rally, the fairy tale ended. Devastated, Clark Gable joined the Air Corps.
Welcome you, Mr. Gable, now Private Gable, into the armed forces of the United States. And I hope that you will serve with pleasure to yourself and honor to our beloved country. Congratulations, may God bless you. Thank you.
From Hollywood to Washington, our men joined up. Supreme Court Justice Frank Murphy left the bench to join the boys in uniform. James Roosevelt, the president's eldest son, was an officer with the Marines in the Pacific. And Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was serving as a lieutenant in the Navy in the Mediterranean. While the armed forces gathered impressive power, some natural forces lost theirs. Niagara Falls froze in the winter of '42. That same winter, the ship Normandy burned in New York Harbor. The U.S. had confiscated this French luxury liner to keep it from falling into Nazi hands. But on February 9, 1942, flames swept its elegant wooden decks. By the next morning, the ship had capsized. Speculation over sabotage sent a ripple of fear through the home front. In the Pacific, we were fighting our first defensive battle and losing. General Douglas MacArthur, his troops isolated in the Philippines with no hope of reinforcements or supplies, was ordered to Australia. His parting declaration to the people of the Philippines was typical of the greatly admired man. I shall return. Our army in the Philippines, now under Lieutenant General Jonathan Wainwright, retreated, decimated to Bataan, and then to Corregidor. Those who didn't die from enemy shells faced death by starvation or disease. When Bataan fell, thousands of American and Filipino troops were taken prisoner. Others perished brutally in the gruesome Bataan Death March. On May 6th, General Wainwright surrendered on the small island of Corregidor. He and his men were taken prisoner. Wainwright himself would not be released until the end of the war. On our own shores, American fear of the Japanese enemy turned to paranoia. Few spoke up to protest when West Coast Japanese Americans were forcibly moved to relocation camps. They lost their homes and their businesses were shut down, allowed to take only those personal belongings they could carry with them. They left the rest in their homes. In many cases, neighbors took the liberty to ransack the homes and sell the belongings of those who were relocated. Newsreels made the roundup seem as if the Japanese Americans were going on a happy vacation.
Japanese evacuated from strategic West Coast areas show little apparent regret. They seem relieved, and some say it's like a holiday. At Los Angeles, fellow Japanese say goodbye as they go to various evacuation clearing centers like the Santa Anita racetrack. In the paddock there, the greatest of thoroughbreds have been seen.
But it was no vacation. The pain and humiliation lasted a lifetime. One man recalled those days of his youth more than 40 years ago. He vividly remembers the overcrowded buses being herded like cattle to desolate, barren barracks. No trees, no hills, no ornamentation. Nothing could be closer to a prison. To him, coming from an environment of quiet beauty, the experience was devastating. This infantry unit was composed of all Japanese Americans. Ironically, many who were serving their country had recently been locked up in camps for fear they couldn't be trusted. But in fact, they proved to be among the bravest and most decorated of American war heroes. And in those days of war, we needed heroes to give us hope. One of our first war heroes was Captain Colin Kelly.
I think my narrowest escape was when I was flying with Captain Colin P. Kelly in the Philippines.
Meyer Levin was the bombardier on Kelly's B-17 when they attacked a Japanese ship in the Philippines. When their plane was hit, the crew bailed out, but Kelly went down. He became a great man in the national imagination, a symbol of heroism and sacrifice. His widow accepted the Distinguished Flying Cross granted to him posthumously. In May 1942, FDR awarded Brigadier General James Doolittle the Medal of Honor for conspicuous leadership above and beyond the call of duty. It was then that the nation learned the story of Doolittle's daring raid over Tokyo. Doolittle had assembled 79 pilots who were trained to take their heavy B-25 bombers off the short deck of the aircraft carrier Hornet. Onto one of the bombs, Doolittle ceremoniously pinned a Japanese medal awarded to the U.S. Navy in 1908. On April 18, 1942, some 600 miles from Japan, the 16 B-25s, heavily laden with bombs, took off with Doolittle in the lead. The news that Tokyo had been bombed had an immediate uplifting effect on Americans, and the heroics of Doolittle and his men became a model for other eager servicemen.
Sure, we're all coming back as soon as we lick.
If you wish to make us extra happy, you could send more mail, some good old American cigarettes, and some nylon hose. And to all you boyfriends back home, please don't sit on the apple tree with anybody else until we girls come marching home. Cheerio, everybody.
Pilots to fly planes from factories to airfields for its Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, the WAFs. The women proved to be very good, sometimes smoother and faster at the controls than male pilots. But despite the women's expertise, the Army Air Forces did not enlist them as military personnel. The WAFs remained civilians. As war correspondents, women excelled in another field traditionally dominated by men. Sally Reston of the New York Times, Mary Welch for Time and Life. The journalists covered topics from the wax and women's issues to bombing strategies and anti-aircraft defense. Peggy Diggins of International News Pictures supplied photographs for many articles. The armed services perpetuated strict segregation. Most blacks were assigned to menial jobs as mess hall attendants or stevedores. But as the call for more troops increased, black units were sent into combat. Black Army soldiers and Air Corps pilots distinguished themselves, and others were trained in specialized operations. Yet the majority performed servants' and laborers' tasks, and whatever the unit or the duty, blacks were segregated. The Army went so far as to segregate donated blood plasma. One black recruit said he was being sent 10,000 miles away to fight for democracy, when just 100 feet away he was not allowed to sit on a stool to drink a bottle of beer. But blacks did go to war, and they marched onward. Overseas, servicemen found ways to relax and relieve the tension of combat. Whether in the Pacific, North Africa, or Europe, our troops Americanized their environment to suit the needs of the R&R periods. And the home front went abroad to entertain the war front. Danny Kaye, Jack Benny, Martha Ray and friends, Joey Brown. If only for a moment, the men forgot the war. Servicemen at home supported their brothers overseas in war bond rallies. At Fort Bragg, North Carolina, military precision enhanced a stunt that would encourage bond sales. War bond rallies became a common event at home, with some of Hollywood's most distinguished personalities taking center stage.
Come on and get 'em, folks. Come on, get right up and get 'em. Any bonds today? Bonds of freedom, that's what I'm selling. Any bonds today? Scrape up the most you can. Here comes the freedom man, asking you to buy your share of freedom today. Many stamps today. Give kiddies. We'll be blessed. We all invest in the USA. Sammy, my Uncle Sammy.
Here comes the freedom man.
Can't make tomorrow's plan. Not unless you buy a share of freedom today. Any stamps, any bonds today.
At New York's Polo Grounds, Army Captain Hank Greenberg signed autographs and looked on at a war bond benefit as baseball greats Walter Johnson, Babe Ruth, and others came out of retirement. In the Pacific, after the devastating defeat at Bataan and Corregidor, the U.S. rapidly reorganized its forces. In June 1942, the Japanese converged on Midway, an island north of Hawaii that would bring them close enough to attack the U.S. mainland. But this time, the Americans were ready. Having cracked the Japanese code, we anticipated the attack. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, staged a massive counterattack with his naval aviators and declared with some satisfaction that Pearl Harbor had been partly avenged. The tide was beginning to turn. Japan had lost much of its naval striking power and was now on the defensive. For the moment, it was not in a position to make new conquests. By the fall of 1942, we were battling on another front. The Allies had devised the North African campaign to keep the Nazis from reaching the Suez Canal and to divert a part of the German army from its ravaging march into the Soviet Union. The British were advancing westward from Egypt through Italian North Africa, but they met up with a shrewd and seemingly invincible foe. General Erwin Rommel, better known as the Desert Fox, rebuffed the British attack at Tobruk. American troops under General Mark Clark swept into French North Africa. With the capture of Algiers, Oran, and Casablanca, the Allies gained a base from which they could invade Sicily. By the end of the year, Rommel was in retreat toward Tunisia, and the Allies were repelling Nazi offensives. But at home, we were still afraid that the enemy might threaten our national sovereignty in more insidious ways.
Today's threat to our national security is not a matter of military weapons alone. We know of new methods of attack. The Trojan horse.
Though our shores were safe, FDR warned us of internal security risks.
Spies, saboteurs, and traitors are the actors in this new strategy. These dividing forces are undiluted poison. They must not be allowed to spread in the new world as they have in the old. Our moral and our mental defenses must be raised up as never before against those who would cast a smokescreen across our vision.
It's a cinch to keep a secret if a fella just takes care. He's sailing on a troop ship. Now we got to find out where. I'm a sound and silent soldier, just as steady as a rock. Here's to my little secret with its chain and padlock. Hello, baby. Hiya, Tussy. Say you're a nifty trick. I hope I'll meet some babes in Africa as cute as you are. This message is important. I must fly it double quick.
Meet a freshman class. These Nazi tools are learning how to be spies. Take a closer look. You may be meeting some of them in America. Because
This propaganda film used fear tactics in dramatizing the Nazi threat in America.
They don't look so dangerous, do they? No. Don't kid yourself. Their weapons aren't the usual weapons of war, guns and knives and bombs. They have a better weapon. You. Yes, we mean you Americans.
And in this film, Spring Byington made us aware of casual information leaks.
And the lengths they go with these security regulations. You'd think they'd grow up. And Jack's friend Bill, you know they broke him several ranks? He was transferred in disgrace to another unit, just for writing some innocent thing under a stamp and talking in a restaurant. Really? What if he did? Suppose some spy did overhear it. I ask you, what good would that do to a spy? After all, this is America. Why, a spy couldn't get that information out of the country. How could he?
He could use invisible ink. Our fear escalated when we learned of the ways secret messages could be transmitted. Censorship of international mail became the norm in an America that was ever more suspicious. useful materials needed for war production. We gathered scrap metal and brought it to designated posts for collection. Scarcity of materials inspired inventiveness. Mr. Haberstad of Parsippany, New Jersey, combated the rubber shortage by making a wooden tire. He claimed it would last 12 to 15,000 miles at moderate speeds. The invention may have seemed strange, and the ride must have been pretty bumpy, but the seriousness of the war industry's need for rubber was real. Our junk had value. The garage took a good cleaning. And the cooking fats we saved were used in the manufacture of explosives. When the salvage truck came by, we were ready to offer up the scrap we had collected to go into making jeeps, bombers, or guns. The Army was called upon to blow up an obsolete Texas bridge for its 250,000 tons of valuable scrap metal. But this figure was dwarfed next to the huge contribution of the greatest scrap collectors of all, children. From the Boy Scouts to the girl next door, children of all ages took part in the salvage operations. The experience of collecting even seemed exciting. The scavenging was fun. Children felt important. They knew they were a part of the war that their fathers and brothers were fighting. The children felt like heroes, and they even got paid for their work, a penny a pound. Whether in the big industrial centers or out in the countryside, the contributions children made, however small, were real. Another wartime game was to see who would be first to fill their book of war stamps. But children, as always, are children. And in wartime America, growing up was much the same as it had always been. There were the chores. And then there was playtime. Five-year-old Alvin Austin of Seattle was perhaps the luckiest boy on the block. His dad made him an airplane out of scrap metal. Neighbors looked on as Alvin performed death-defying stunts on his aircraft. Teenagers were, for the first time, developing a style of their own. With fathers at war and mothers working, teens began to develop their own social codes. inflation and a restricted market. Ceilings were put on prices at a time when many consumer goods were in short supply. The OPA, the Office of Price Administration, sent its volunteers to explain to shopkeepers the need to display fixed prices. Actress Helen Hayes helped spread the word and publicize the efforts of the OPA. Without the restraint of both the consumer and the shopkeeper, inflation and the black market could destroy the war economy. People queued up to get their gas ration tickets. The tickets were classed from A to E.
Well, here it is. Only 3 gallons a week. There goes my vacation, but I'm very pleased to make the sacrifice.
A ticket holders, pleasure drivers, were limited to 3 gallons a week, while E, for emergency, merited unlimited gas supplies.
Okay, it's an A card, 3 gallons.
With very little gas available, more people relied on public transportation. The crowd glutted the system, creating a shortage of services for soldiers en route to camps. One Florida couple solved the whole problem with this unique means of transportation. In the Soviet Union in the winter of 42-43, the invading German army, until then victorious, met their Waterloo at Stalingrad. When the Soviets counterattacked on November 19th, the German army was trapped. The fierce winter was an enemy the Nazis had not bargained for, and their doomed army finally broke its siege of Stalingrad at the end of January 1943 and began its long retreat. The Soviets celebrated, but they had lost more men at Stalingrad than the U.S. would lose in combat during the entire war. In North Africa, the new year found the Allies in control of much of the coast. With the British pressing in from Egypt on the east and the Americans moving in from Algeria in the west, the Germans were caught in the pincers of 2 powerful armies. In high spirits, the 2 armies met, along with the Free French in northern Tunisia. As soldiers exchanged greetings, their commanders did the same. Despite Rommel's repeated warnings, Hitler refused to let the general withdraw, and when the Nazis surrendered early in May, the Allies captured 275,000 Axis. And the propaganda films were provocative.
To win wars, you need manpower. We know how many men the United States can put into the field. This number is limited by the number of men necessary for production of the materiel with which to fight. The ratio of workers to soldiers is fixed.
Herr Eberlein, have you ever considered the possibility of woman labor?
American women?
The films motivated women into joining the workforce. Those who could left their children in nurseries and went to work wherever they were needed. The image of the woman in overalls, wrench in hand, hair tied up in a bandana, became the symbol of the new 40s woman. She was known as Rosie the Riveter, and without her home front army, the war could never have been won. The 20.5 million victory gardens we planted in 1943 yielded at least 1/3 of all the vegetables we consumed that year. And in the neighborhoods, women gathered to can the harvest. Because of food shortages, for the first time in American history, ration books were distributed. A year's supply of dated food stamps brought you your ration of meat, sugar, butter, and canned goods every month. Each item required a certain number of stamps, and when you reached the cashier, you turned over your stamps when you paid. With only 2 pounds of meat allotted per person each week, the black market flourished. Propaganda films were again used to combat the problem.
What a delicious dinner. All right with me, that silly butcher doesn't want to take our money. What a dope. It's all that ration board's fault. Last week I couldn't even get an extra pair of shoes.
The story continues with the women's nightmare in which the neighborhood butcher takes them to the ration board to learn a lesson.
What'd that tell you? He's got horns.
Yeah, that's how people seem when they don't worry about learning the facts. Would you mind explaining the reason of rationing to these girls?
You see, large amounts of foods like meat, butter, canned fruits, and vegetables are going to war. Now, in order to see that everyone gets a chance to buy his or her fair share, we ration them. Share and share alike.
Cigarettes were also in short supply. Roll your own became the patriotic way to smoke. We honored the people who made a special commitment to the war effort, such as Harry Powers and his family from Coscob, Connecticut. They converted their garage into a war production plant. Or Genevieve Sullivan, she joined the Navy's waves in memory of her 5 brothers, the heroic Sullivans. They all went down with their ship, the USS Juno, in the Solomons. Honor was a virtue we held especially dear in these times. It was highlighted by the patriotism of ceremonies and the special meaning they held for us in 1943. This July 4th parade in Union, New Jersey, captured in home movies, reminded us of those who were fighting overseas and of our own sacrifices at home. That same summer, a heat wave hit the U.S. For kids and horses, relief came right in the streets of New York. Hollywood simply tried to pretend it was cold with piles of fake snow. But we were confronted with reality at this memorial service for Jews persecuted in Europe. It was introduced in New York by Paul Muni.
There are 4 million Jews surviving in Europe. The Germans have promised to deliver to the world, by the end of the year, a Christmas package of 4 million dead Jews. And this is not a Jewish problem. It is a problem that belongs to humanity, and it is a challenge to the soul of man.
In Lublin, 500 of our women and children were led to the marketplace and stood against the vegetable stalls we knew so well. Here the Germans turned machine guns on us and killed us all. Remember us.
The children also needed to learn about the injustice and ignorance behind racial intolerance. In this film, Frank Sinatra helps to make the point.
Yeah, but 10 against 1. That's not very fair.
Come on.
What's it all about?
None of your business. We don't like his religion.
His religion.
Look, mister, he's a dirt...
Now, hold on. I see what you mean. You must be a bunch of those Nazi werewolves I've been reading about.
Mister, are you screwy?
Not me. I'm an American.
Well, what do you think we are?
Nazis?
Don't call me a Nazi. My father's a sergeant in the army. He been wounded even.
Son, anybody in your family ever go to the blood bank?
Sure, my mother and my father both.
Uh-huh. You know what? I bet you maybe his pop's blood helped save your dad's life. That's bad.
What's bad about it?
Well, don't you see? Your father doesn't go to the same church as his father does. That's awful. Do you think maybe if your father knew about it in time, he would rather have died than to take blood from a man of another religion? Would you have wanted him to die? Would your mom want him to die?
No.
You and your good American heads. Don't let anybody make suckers out of you. Well, gotta go to work.
What do you work?
I sing.
Ah, you're a kid.
Frankie's voice made teenage girls faint, but rival crooner Bing Crosby was not so ecstatic.
Nothing to do with this, and I wouldn't talk that way about Sinatra.
I don't mean to
if I were
malign
you.
Mr. Sinatra, because I'm a great fan of his, a great admirer of his private and
And
public life.
furthermore,
Why?
singers like Sinatra come once in a lifetime.
Why did he have to come along in my lifetime?
Harpo Marx was only one in the staggering list of stars in the movie Stage Door Canteen, based on the actual Broadway night spot where well-known actors both served and entertained servicemen.
Sure, I came from a famous vaudeville family. My uncle was Rajah and his Lions. Did you ever see that act? 15 years my uncle was in vaudeville. He used to open the lion's mouth and put his whole head right in the lion's mouth. But one day the darndest thing happened. And, hello, Uncle.
It's beastly hot. I'm suffocating. That's what I say. Now I feel natural. Oh, my, what a chest. Oh! Oh!
I want you to gaze into my eyes and concentrate. Now, please. Are you hypnotizing or are you watering the lawn? Now, concentrate. Close your eyes. Now, if you do that again, so help me, I'll slug you, Bergen. All right. Now, at the count of 3, you'll be asleep. 1, 2, 3. That doesn't. Oh, no. I'll do it, Bergen. I'll do it properly. Let us return to the crystal and see what the future holds for you. All right, let's return, yes. What's in there? Well, now, let me see. Mm-hmm.
Hello, fellas. We had some guests of honor here the other night. Convalescent men from an army
Stars
hospital.
also contributed to the lineup at USO canteens across America.
I thought maybe you'd like to take a look. Especially you fellas who are so far away from home. So, let's look around. You be our honored guest tonight. Okay? You're greeted at the door by Lana Turner, Deanna Durbin, and Marlena Dietrich.
Once through those doors, servicemen happily danced the night away. But there always came a time when the dancing ended.
I hope you don't sail California. I hope you be back because I'd like to be your girl again. Something wrong with your throat?
Yeah. There's a lump in it.
With the capture of Sicily, the Allied invasion of Europe had begun. The Italian people, disgruntled with fascism and anxious for peace, welcomed the Allies. On September 3rd, the British 8th Army landed in Italy. 5 days later, the Italian government surrendered. The next day, U.S. troops landing at Salerno, 30 miles south of Naples, discovered that the German army occupying Italy was determined to fight it out. Under heavy American and British air and naval attacks, the Germans eventually retreated. On October 1st, the Allies liberated Naples. By the end of the year, American GIs were taking bets on when they would see Rome. Italian Americans on the home front were overjoyed by the news. In New York's Little Italy, they celebrated the Allied victory. Eleanor Roosevelt visited a Red Cross hospital in New Zealand and told the soldiers one of the president's favorite stories.
Just as the Marines were ordered to leave Guadalcanal, an officer found a private feeling very sad, looking very depressed. And he said, "What's the matter with you?" And he said, "Oh, I just can't go home. I haven't shot a Jap." And so the officer said, "Well, listen, I'll tell you what to do. You go up to that ridge over there and jump up all of a sudden and say, 'The hell with your ego.' And they'll jump up other people all around, and if you shoot first, you'll get a Jap." So he came by a little while later, and he was still looking very gloomy, and he said, "Did you do what I told you to do?" And, "Yes, sir, yes. I ran up there, and I did just what you told me to do, and I said, 'To hell with your ego,' and they jumped up just as you told me they would, but they all shouted, 'To hell with Roosevelt.'"
The joke could provoke laughter, for we were winning in the Pacific. A few weeks later, we would take the Gilberts, though our losses in 4 days at Tarawa were almost as high as our losses after 6 months at Guadalcanal. At the end of 1943, the United States and Britain met with the Soviet Union for the first time at the Tehran Conference. The most important decision Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin made concerned D-Day. They approved the plan to open a new front in Europe, invading Nazi-occupied France in a daring attack across the English Channel. The objectives for 1944 were set. The primary goal, the liberation of Europe. Christmas 1943. And for just a moment, the feeling of peace.